The usual, ma'am?
Please.
Show after show, The Download delivers the best information in advertising. The Download, it's worth it.
Microsoft Advertising.
The Download.
Tell me what you want when you want it.
The Download.
Tell me what you want when you want it.
Bonjour everyone, welcome to episode 8 of The Download. I'm Jennifer Solomon-Baum alongside my co-host, Jeffrey Cologne. Jeff, here we are, last episode of the season.
That's right, Jennifer. 8 episodes in the can. The things I learned the most over this past year is how to produce video from a remote environment. I was 1,100 miles away from Los Angeles, and yet I came into everyone's living room like I was here on set.
I know you were a flat screen at some point, and I had this magic button to make you appear, but now you're in the flesh.
Yes,
it's amazing.
yeah, so it'll be exciting.
I think we also learn of, how to be adaptable and tap into our resilience. I remember our plans at the beginning of the pandemic. We threw them out the window, and we had to be just quick on our feet and adjust to, circumstances we can control.
Yeah.
What do we have in this episode, Jeff?
We have retail insights from the lens of a post-pandemic world. We also have an interview with our colleague Nora. She speaks to Editor-in-Chief of Search Engine Land, George Nguyen, about the Asian American experience. Be a very powerful interview.
Really looking forward to sharing that with you. But first, let's kick things off with some retail insights, this time voiced by our colleague, Norman McGill.
For the past year, the constant drumbeat for retail marketers has been to brace for a future of online shopping all the time. But now that we're entering a post-COVID world, will an emphasis on e-commerce be a best practice? Consumers now expect a great experience across all the channels available to them. Forget digital versus physical. To shoppers, it's now one and the same. What should retailers be thinking about in our post-pandemic landscape? Here are 3 things. Number 1, time is precious. Consumers are prioritizing their time now, and this behavior will stick. In the pre-COVID world, online shopping was heaviest in the morning and again in the evening, before and after commute times. But during the pandemic, when commuting ground to a halt, we saw shopping behavior expand across a 12-hour period. Marketers should keep this in mind when serving ads or remarketing. Potential customers could take action at any time, but watch out for weekends. This is now a sacred time, so that Sunday morning email offer just might end up in the trash. Number 2, physical education. The past year, e-commerce boomed by over 43%. In response, many physical retailers fast-tracked long-range digital projects. Expect this digital-first trend to continue. This will lead to smaller store footprints with less inventory. We will also see hybrid store layouts optimized for online order picking and fulfillment. And physical stores will evolve to have a more experiential feel, like a cosmetics counter that doubles as a live video studio to reach the masses online. And number 3, BOPUS and customer-first design. Your BOPUS offering, buy online, pick up in store, should be seamless and customer-first. Emphasize efficiency when it comes to picking up an order. Tools like location targeting can help you find your top audience by a specific area, from zip codes and cities to states, countries, and more. This also gives your store associates the ability to compensate for real-time in-person orders, so customers don't wait too long at curbside. So what will retail look like a year from now? The reality is that COVID didn't change things much, it only accelerated digital trends that were already being adopted, just at a slower pace. In the short term, retailers will have to close the gap between their digital and physical experience. No doubt there will be a spike in traffic to the mall once life looks a bit more normal. But make no mistake about it, consumers are not going backwards. The behavior they adopted over the last year is here to stay.
All right, we wanted to end the season with a bang, so we have something really special for you right now. Our next guest is arguably the world's top authority on consumer behavior, A marketing professor at the Wharton School of Business, Jonah Berger is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Contagious: Why Things Catch On, an essential read on marketing and social influence. His latest book is called The Catalyst: How to Change Anyone's Mind. I could use his help with my kids, actually. So Jeff spoke with him earlier, and we're thrilled to present it to you. It's our big interview.
And we're here with Jonah Berger, author of the books The Catalyst and Contagious. Jonah, thanks for joining us here on The Download.
Thanks so much for having me.
You wrote this book called The Catalyst. What do we do wrong when we're trying to get people to change their minds and take action on something?
Whether we're trying to change consumer behavior, change a customer's mind, change a boss or a colleague's behavior, or change the way an entire organization does business, we often take a particular approach, some version of pushing. We think we add more facts, more figures, more reasons, more information, even more emotional appeals. We think all of that will get people to come around. But the problem is pushing doesn't work. Right? Pushing often makes people feel defensive, it makes them resist and dig in their heels, and often makes them less likely to do what we want them to do. And so in The Catalyst, I talk about a different approach to change. Rather than pushing, how we can identify the barriers or the obstacles that are getting in the way of change and mitigate them. How we can figure out what's getting in the way of encouraging people to do what we want, and by removing those barriers, make change a lot more likely.
So there's two areas that changed real heavily this past year. One was how people worked. You had people working from home, people working pretty much in a remote environment. The other one was shopping. You know, what we took for granted in terms of how we shopped really changed. Now that we're looking at an era of the post-pandemic, you know, how do we get people to change their behavior, getting them to think beyond just looking at a screen all the time?
This is a big challenge for a lot of companies and organizations. You know, as I talk about in the book, people don't like to change. We have the status quo bias. We love to stick with the things we're doing already. But the pandemic's forced us to change in almost every area of our life, right? We've had to work from home. We've had to shop online. We've had to do virtual schooling for the kids. We can't go to the gym. We've got to figure out other ways to exercise. And so I think the interesting question is now, hopefully, as the pandemic begins to wind down, what are people going to go back to? Right? Are they going to go back to that initial thing they did before, which they didn't want to leave? Or have they adopted new habits that are now going to be hard to break, right? I talk to a lot of people that say, you know, my boss wants me to come back to the office, but I don't know if I want to come back to the office. I've gotten used to working at home. And so I think this is a big opportunity for a lot of firms and organizations. It's obviously very challenging, but I think it's a big opportunity in two ways, right? First, before these new habits calcify, figuring out how we can change things in the way we want to move them. If you think about a snowstorm, for example, you know, if you wait until the next day until the snow is frozen over, it's really hard to shovel the walk, right? Why? Because it's already frozen. It's calcified. It's hard to move once things get solidified. But if you get out there with a shovel and get out there early enough before it's turned to ice, it's pretty easy to move the snow around. And so I think before people get too set in their new ways, what do we want those new habits to be? How do we want people to shop? Where do we want people to work? And how can we encourage them to transition to what we want them to do soon before they could get too stuck in their new ways or too stuck in the old ones? And so I think that's a big opportunity both for marketers and employers to take advantage of this change before it becomes too solidified.
The customer shopping experience, if you could change one thing post-pandemic that, you know, either stays with us or that should be new and introduced, what would it be?
I think what the pandemic has done is it's forced us to do many things online, do many things virtually. And there's the tendency after something like this happens either to go completely back to what was done before or stick with completely virtual. And I think the real opportunity is what is online or virtual good for? I think a lot about this, and we talk a lot about this at Wharton when we talk about, you know, how retail should be used. It used to be that physical retail was the only way to sell goods. So companies sold through physical stores. Then they could sell online. A whole bunch of companies went only online. And then a bunch of companies came back and said, well, hey, actually physical stores are really good for certain things. They're not good for everything, but they're good for experiencing the brand. They're good for trying things on. They're good for certain aspects of that customer journey. And so take brands like a Warby Parker or Bonobos or other sort of brands that say, okay, we're going to use retail in a very specific way. We're not going to use it because we have to. and we're not going to use it because everyone else has been using it, but we're really going to think about what is retail good for and what is online good for, and let's use those different channels for different things. And so I hope one thing comes out of the pandemic is, well, what are these different channels good for, and how can we use them what they're good for? Right? Let's not just go back teaching all in person because it's what we did before. Let's think about, well, what was really good about teaching in person? What's really good about teaching virtual? And let's mix and match. Same thing with working, right? Whether it's from the office or other places, thinking about, well, where's working really good for? What is working from the office versus other places good for, and what is it bad for? And how can we focus on those aspects and leverage the good things and avoid the bad ones?
Jonah Berger, the author of the books The Catalyst and Contagious. We'll make sure we put links to both of those books in our show notes for our viewers. Thanks for joining us here on The Download. We really appreciate it.
Terrific interview, Jeff.
Thanks.
So let's add The Catalyst to our reading list for this summer or winter, depending where you are in the world.
Correct.
Remind me, what month are we now?
It's June.
That's right, thank you. So speaking of June, for nearly 70 years now, the world's brightest minds have descended on the south of France for the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity.
Well, every normal June. Last year, the festival was canceled altogether. This year, it was back as a virtual event, and Microsoft did have a presence.
That's right. Our team led important discussion on the future of experiences, speaking of hybrid, identity and the world after third-party cookies, and inclusive marketing.
Here's a look at our Cannes Lions 2021 recap.
Being at Microsoft at this particular time and being able to work on a project like the event transformation into the digital world, against the backdrop of us being recognized as a company who's done kind of remarkable and recognizable work in the marketing space, and the recognition that the Cannes Lions is giving to us this year. Overwhelmingly, it feels like what we're trying to do is connect at a human level with every person and every organization on the planet to help enable them do more. Certainly that's our mission. But it really does drive the objectives and the way we approach marketing and connecting with our customers and our partners and the people we work with across the planet. But you see it as you look across all the work we're doing with accessibility, with inclusion, all of it speaking at a very human level, even though the products and services we're delivering are very, very complicated and very technical. But now, how do those things coexist? Not separately, but interwoven, so that the interactive audience and the audience that will exist and continue to exist in the digital world can equally commingle and interact with the people that are live in a given location. Even things like Cannes Lions will, I think, be incredibly influenced by this commingling of the digital experience and the live experience as we move forward to engage with each other and with brands, with customers in the future.
My name is Jeff Nienaber. I'm the Senior Director of Audience Advertising at Microsoft. The state of digital identity today is stormy, and big waves of change keep crashing on our shores, and we as an industry are not collectively ready for them. One big wave is third-party identities. Well, they're gone. Third-party cookies and most mobile ad IDs are decaying every day. We absolutely must respect consumer privacy above everything else, above growth, margin, and even return on ad spend. Consumer privacy, inclusive of respect, transparency, and control, are all essential for building trust and creating meaningful consumer relationships with brands, with publishers, creators, and influencers. This is Cannes Lions. This is the epicenter of creativity in our industry. So it's important for us to understand that we have a broad spectrum of opportunity in front of us, with new value exchanges waiting for us to experiment with, that pull consumers, prospects, and customers closer to our brands. Decentralization of identity is one such path forward that we must explore together as a scalable way to create a truly free and open and consumer-controlled digital ecosystem. This is our true north. If we want to continue building this future and keep innovation thriving, we must do better. It's our web, and together we must chart the right course forward to calm the stormy seas that threaten to upend our industry.
I am so excited to be here talking with Christina J. Pyle, Chief Equity Officer, America's Dentsu. We're going to have an inspiring conversation about the future of inclusion and marketing with purpose. Christina, it is so great to have you here, and what a better time, really. Thanks, Christina. We are really so impressed with Dentsu and your insatiable drive for inclusion. So much so, Dentsu took home the Global Inclusive Marketing and Culture Award for Microsoft Advertising.
We are committed to education and continuous learning, and in some places, unlearning. And we believe that cultural fluency is the new business currency. And we're also committed to being a force for good in the world through our clients and community impact. So that's our clients, that's our people, that's the industry, and that's society. So D&I cannot just live over here in a silo. It cannot live in a department. It can't be a department of one. It has to be threaded and embedded throughout our business and how we work and the ways that we do work.
I think it's a great example for all of the industry and any business, not just the ad industry, but any business to follow. And for those of you out there watching and listening, if you want to join us on this journey of learning, the Marketing with Purpose course is there for you at MicrosoftAdvertising.com, where you'll learn more research, tactics, and insights for building a more trusted customer experience that drives long-term loyalty and growth.
Hi, I'm Nora. I'm a group marketing manager at Microsoft Advertising. I'm taking over this segment this month to discuss an important topic, inclusion for marketing with purpose, around the Asian and Asian American experience.
My name is George Nguyen. That's usually how I say it. The correct way to say it, the Vietnamese way to say it, is Nguyen. And we say last name and then first name. I won't go over my entire Vietnamese name, but it's monosyllabic, so that's the important thing to know there. It's not Nguyen, it's just one syllable. That's why for most people I say Nguyen, and that's the safest way to go about it.
Thank you again for having this conversation with me. I actually feel really powerful as a marketer to be able to think about the message that I can put out there both to businesses and consumers that ultimately is actually good for business. So how do you reconcile these heavy societal issues with what you do for your job?
Brand safety is a huge issue, especially with the murder of George Floyd last year and all the subsequent issues that have arisen that have to do with race. Brands are now concerned with saying or doing something that could be perceived as bigotry. I feel like it's easy to think, oh no, it's not gonna happen because we're not idiots. And you may not be idiots, but it doesn't take an idiot for these things to happen. Look at the companies that are making blunders. These are huge corporations. They have so many employees and nobody's thought before they hit the publish button or did whatever their campaign did to say, hey, maybe this is a bad look for us. And thus you have to issue the apology. So brand safety is a huge thing. And when I can, I like to tell people ways that they can approach marketing with more inclusivity, with more acceptance towards people, so that first of all, they don't have to issue embarrassing things and become an example in an article I write, but also so that they can widen their audience and achieve their business objectives.
Can you help them understand or think about how tactically they can bring this into their jobs, both in paid ads as well as outside of it?
You're going to want to look at the words that you use within your copy. And this isn't just for people writing ads, it's for organic. If you are on social media and you're writing posts, are your words inclusive? So this is something I'm trying to work out of my vernacular is ableist terminology. Terms like going in blind. I mean, I've been watching TV shows from the 90s, and I'm looking at them with totally fresh eyes because these jokes have not aged well. So is your content going to age well? I mean, isn't that the point for it to be there so that it can serve you over the long term? Especially if you're in organic, you're making that investment up front. So you want to make sure it lasts you a long time. A lot of people, they just throw up their hands and they say, well, my company's not into that, or my company has other priorities. And I would contend that there's not really a larger priority than being on the same page as your audience, because especially these last few years, consumers have shown that they're willing to flock to brands that have the same values as them. So are you displaying those values that your target audience is looking for? Brands like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's are always making headlines. And that's just the kind of stuff that, the kind of PR that you can't really pay for. And they're doing it by expressing their values, being very vocal, That's not for every brand, I understand, but at least you can use terminology that speaks to everybody.
So I have one confession to make. I have a big worry that this is all a moment in time and time will pass, people will forget, and we sort of look back a few years from now, look back in this moment, and this conversation is still valid. I would love for this conversation to not be valid anymore. What do you think people can do right now? What is that one thing they can start with to just kick off that process?
Nothing makes you more accepting and more inclusive than being invested in somebody different than yourself. I've lived in Korea and I've lived in Japan and I've visited all over Asia and a little bit of Europe. And meeting people whose kindness you rely on simply just to do things like get around makes everything so much more concrete, and it becomes very difficult to turn your back on people once you've been exposed to how willing they are to help you for no reason at all. So not everybody has access to that though. Not everybody in their neighborhood has diverse families that they can get in touch with. So if that's something that you really want to do, being an ally and educating yourself is one way to go about it. But I wouldn't do that in a vacuum, because that can lead to going the opposite end where everything needs to be super diverse and like you're artificially trying to make things the perfect version of the world. You need to be in touch with reality so that you can push reality to its more ideal position, for lack of a better word here.
Thank you, George, for having this really important conversation with us today.
Thank you very much, Nora.
Really powerful conversation between Nora and George from Search Engine Land, and a good reminder also that inclusive marketing is not a tick in the box for
Correct.
D&I. It's really good for business.
Yeah, it really is. And if we think about advertising and how it's been shaped and reshaped the last 5 years, we want to make sure we include all people, all representation in advertising. And I think that's where Nora and George are sort of noting, even on advertising that doesn't deal with visuals, there's still machine learning behind that. So I think it's important that we include how we actually create technology.
And for more on this topic, we recently hosted an Open Perspectives event where we explored inclusion, representation, and allyship of the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Check it out at microsoftadvertising.com/open perspectives. And that's a wrap for episode 8 and our first year of the download. What a journey.
Yeah.
What's your highlight, Jeff?
Has to be interviewing Heidi Cooley, CMO of Crocs, from my living room while I was wearing a pair of Crocs. I mean, how apropos is that? What a year. I mean, when Crocs is not only the sort of uniform to wear, but influencers were stumbling over each other to, get sponsored from the brand.
I got to wear socks and Crocs, and truly the new business chic. I think one of the highlights for me was interviewing myself. I think that was episode 4.
Episode 4.
Yeah, quite the outer body experience, and strange and wonderful.
Love it, love it. Thanks to our entire global team here at Microsoft Advertising, all the contributors, all the producers behind the scenes who have worked so hard all year.
And thanks to all our guests, and especially thanks to all of you for watching and making our first season a huge success. We'll take a short break, but we'll be back in September with an all-new season.
And make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the Download podcast. You can listen to that. Until then, take care and be well, and happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Sorry.
Wrong button.
And action, Jeff.